Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a trip back in time, back to a moment that honestly felt like science fiction just decided to crash land right into our reality. I want you to picture it. We're in the mid-1990s. The world is buzzing with this new, almost electric kind of energy. That screeching, kind of magical sound of a dial-up modem, that's the sound of households connecting to this brand new thing called the World Wide Web. The dot-com boom is just starting to bubble up, and you can just feel it in the air, you know? It's this mix of wild, thrilling optimism and this deep, humming anxiety that technology is on the verge of changing, well, pretty much everything. And smack dab in the middle of this whole cultural whirlwind, a battle is brewing. A battle that seems to pit the very essence of human genius against the cold, hard circuits and code of our own creations. On one side of the chessboard, you have Garry Kasparov. And listen, he's not just the world chess champion. The man is a force of nature. For more than a decade, he's been the absolute pinnacle of human strategic thought. He's fiery, he's passionate, he's intuitive, he's a titan who doesn't just play chess, he wages war over those 64 squares. And his opponent? It's not another man. It's not another rival forged in the tough competitive Soviet chess schools. Nope. His opponent is a $10 million IBM supercomputer, a beast of silicon and wire nicknamed Deep Blue. A machine built for one single, stark purpose, to do what everyone thought was impossible, to beat the unbeatable. This story, as we're about to unpack, is so much more than just a chess match. It's a high-stakes psychological thriller, it's a tense corporate drama, and you know what? Ultimately, it's a really profound look in the mirror. A look at who we are and who we want to become, in a world that's just filled with machines that get smarter every single day. Let's dive in.
So these are Kasparov's own words. And you can just feel the sheer weight of history in that sentence. Let that sink in for a second. Fighting for my chess life. Think about that language. That's not the kind of thing you say about a friendly exhibition match, right? That is the language of survival, of desperation. And then you've got that Newsweek cover, The Brain's Last Stand. Wow. I mean, just think about the incredible narrative power packed into that headline. It wasn't a fun tech matchup. It wasn't even man versus machine. It was a last stand. That phrase just brings up these images of a final, heroic, desperate battle against some overwhelming, maybe even inevitable force. It deliberately puts this chess match into the same kind of mythological space as, say, John Henry, the steel-driving man, swinging his hammer against the steam drill. It's a symbol of the human spirit railing against the cold, relentless march of industrial progress. Now try to put yourself in Kasparov's shoes at that moment. His entire life, he had battled other humans, men with egos, with fears, with ambitions he could understand, and more importantly, that he could exploit. And all of a sudden, the entire world's media has cast him as the lone defender of all human intellect, the final bastion for our species' claim to have some kind of unique genius. The pressure must have been absolutely immense, almost unimaginable. He wasn't just playing for a world title anymore. In a way, he was playing for all of us.
Okay, so to really get the full drama of this whole confrontation, we have to understand the forces that actually shaped it. We need to meet the champion, Garry Kasparov, right at the absolute peak of his powers. But we also have to understand the challenger. And this challenger, well, it was something completely new. For decades, the entire world of elite chess was defined by the Cold War. Kasparov was the ultimate product of one system, right? The famous Soviet chess machine. His rivals were other men who were products of that very same system. But Deep Blue was different. It wasn't born from some ideology or state-run training camps. It was born in the corporate laboratories of IBM, right in the heart of the United States, which was, of course, Kasparov's former ideological enemy. So this match wasn't just man versus machine. It was a collision of two completely different worlds, two different philosophies about how you create intelligence, all with this fascinating layer of historical irony just woven through the whole thing. Kasparov's own words right here, they give us the key to his entire character. This is the engine that drove his genius. And this isn't just some casual admission he's making. It's a mission statement. To understand why a champion of his level has to hate losing, you have to understand what chess is. It's a game of almost perfect information. There's no hidden luck. There's no roll of the dice. There's just the board, the pieces, and the minds of the two players. A loss, in that context, isn't just a bad outcome. It feels like a direct, objective takedown of your intellect. It's a verdict. It says your strategy was flawed, your calculation was worse, your vision just wasn't good enough. For a mind like Kasparov's, a mind that's built on the absolute conviction of its own supremacy, a loss is nothing short of an existential threat. So when he says he's a sore loser, it's not really about bad sportsmanship. It's about a worldview where victory is the only possible validation of his entire life's work. This burning, passionate hatred of defeat, that's the fuel for his greatness. And as we're going to see, it's also the very vulnerability that the machine would eventually exploit.
Let's paint a little picture for you. The year is 1985. We're in Hamburg, Germany. A brash, unbelievably confident 22-year-old Garry Kasparov, who's already a legend in the making. He just strides into a room. And he's not there to play one opponent. No, he's there to face 32 of them. 32 of the world's best chess-playing computers, all at the same time. And these weren't the little pocket chess games you might remember from back in the day. These were the strongest programs of their time, but they were still, fundamentally just tactical calculators. They could see a few moves ahead with incredible accuracy, but they really lacked any kind of deep strategic understanding of the game. And Kasparov, he just demolishes them. A perfect score, 32-0. An organizer at the time actually warned him. He said, "Garry, you must be careful. They will never get tired. They will never resign in dejection." And Kasparov's reaction? He loved it. He saw their inhuman stamina not as a threat, but as this exciting new feature of the game. He was completely, utterly fearless, just supremely confident that his human creativity and his intuition would always, always be superior. He just couldn't imagine a future where that wouldn't be true. His confidence was like a mountain. He had absolutely no idea that in just over a decade, that mountain was about to face a massive earthquake.
So, this quest to build a machine that could master chess, it's almost as old as the computer itself. It's a dream that goes way back to the very foundations of artificial intelligence. It all kicks off in 1952 with the absolute genius Alan Turing. Before powerful computers were even a real thing, Turing sat down with a pen and paper and he created an algorithm, basically a set of rules for playing chess. He acted as the CPU himself, painstakingly executing his own code by hand, sometimes taking half an hour just to decide on one single move. And incredibly, this paper machine, as it was called, played a competent game. It was just an act of pure vision. For years after that, progress was pretty slow. In 1968, a Scottish international master named David Levy, seeing all this breathless optimism from early AI researchers, made a famous bet that no computer could beat him in a match within 10 years. And he collected on that bet in 1978. He used this clever anti-computer strategy, creating these boring, closed positions where the machine's tactical strength was just useless. It was a strategy that, interestingly enough, kind of foreshadowed Kasparov's own approach years later. But the tide was definitely turning. In 1988, we get a huge milestone from Carnegie Mellon University. Their machine, High-Tech, officially achieved a Grandmaster rating, the highest title in chess. This meant a machine wasn't just some novelty anymore. It was actually playing at an elite human level. Then just 1 year later, High-Tech's successor, a machine called Deep Thought, defeated a Grandmaster for the first time in a real tournament game. And that right there is when the game changed forever. The creators of Deep Thought, they were hired by IBM. The project was no longer a purely academic thing, it became a high-stakes corporate mission with a new name, Deep Blue. And the goal was no longer just to play great chess, it was to beat the world champion, for the glory of the IBM brand.
This brings us to these two clashing philosophies of intelligence that are really at the heart of our story. On one side, you've got the Soviet chess machine. This was the system that created Kasparov. It was this massive, top-down, state-sponsored institution. I want you to picture intense training camps run by former champions like Mikhail Botvinnik, where young talents were drilled relentlessly on opening theory, endgame technique, psychological warfare, you name it. It was a system built on human tradition and mentorship, and it was designed to forge perfect chess players as a form of Cold War propaganda to prove the intellectual superiority of the communist system. Then on the other side, you had the American approach. It wasn't top-down at all. It was a bottom-up, decentralized effort that was just bubbling up from university labs and corporate R&D departments. It wasn't driven by ideology, it was driven by Moore's Law, by corporate ambition, and by this uniquely American techno-optimism. This belief that any problem, no matter how complex or elegant it is, could be solved with enough processing power. This approach wasn't about intuition, it was all about brute force. That term is so key here. It means calculating millions and eventually hundreds of millions of possible positions per second, and just overwhelming a human opponent, not with a better understanding but with a tidal wave of raw tactical calculation. The 1996 match was the ultimate showdown. Human intuition honed by a state-run factory versus brute force calculation unleashed by a corporate one.
And so, the stage was set. Philadelphia, February 1996. The atmosphere was just electric. This wasn't some niche event for chess geeks. This was a global media spectacle. Cameras and journalists from all over the world just descended on the city to witness the end of this half-century quest. It was Kasparov, the ultimate product of the human-centric Soviet system, facing off against Deep Blue, the ultimate product of American corporate technology. Kasparov went into it confident. He was the undisputed king. He fully expected to win. And he would win. But in the very first game of the match, the machine would fire a warning shot that sent this tremor of shock and awe through the entire world. A shot that nobody, least of all Garry Kasparov, was prepared for.
The match starts, and history is made almost instantly. Kasparov, playing with the white pieces, he goes in with his usual swagger, expecting to kind of poke and prod the machine, test its limits, find the cracks in its programming, and then slowly, methodically, just take it apart. But that is not what happens. Deep Blue plays with this unnerving, inhuman precision. It meets every single one of Kasparov's ideas with a perfect response. As the game gets deeper, this quiet tension just fills the hall. The unthinkable starts to seem, well, possible. And then it happens. Deep Blue defeats Garry Kasparov. The room is just stunned into silence. It was the very first time in history that a reigning world chess champion had lost to a computer under standard, classical tournament time controls. This wasn't some quick exhibition game on the side. This was the real deal. The fortress had been breached. The media absolutely exploded. Kasparov himself was visibly shaken. For him, a man whose entire identity was built on being invincible, this wasn't just a loss. It was a profound psychological blow that landed with the force of a haymaker.
A commentator used this incredible analogy to describe a key moment in that first game, and it perfectly captures what was so deeply alien and unsettling about the machine's play. Let's really break this down. General Meade was the Union commander at the Battle of Gettysburg. Pickett's charge was the final, desperate, all-or-nothing assault at the Confederates. It was the climax of the battle. For a general to send his soldiers off on some trivial task like apple picking at that precise moment of maximum danger, that would be the height of military insanity. It's an act that no human leader would ever even think of, because humans operate on probability, on risk assessment, on fear. But the machine isn't human. Late in the game, Kasparov had unleashed this ferocious attack on Deep Blue's king, and instead of defending desperately, the machine made this calm, quiet move to go gobble up a meaningless pawn way on the other side of the board. To human eyes, it looked like absolute madness. But it wasn't. Deep Blue had simply calculated every single possibility with absolute certainty, and concluded that it could survive the attack and that its little apple-picking trip would not cost it the game. This wasn't confidence. This was the cold, terrifying certainty of pure logic. And it was this alien quality, this utter lack of doubt, that unnerved Kasparov right to his core.
So how does a champion come back from a blow like that? This is where Kasparov's greatness really shines. First, he had to conquer his own mind. After the initial shock and the fear of Game 1, he had this critical aha moment. He forced himself to stop personifying the machine, to stop thinking of it as some new intelligence. He started seeing it for what it was, a tool. A fantastically fast calculator, sure, but still just a tool, with predictable strengths and, more importantly, exploitable weaknesses. This realization was step 1, and it was absolutely crucial. Step 2 was to adapt his strategy. He deliberately shifted to what's known as an anti-computer style. He basically refused to get into these wild tactical street fights, where the machine's brute force calculation gave it a huge edge. Instead, he started playing this quiet, subtle, long-term positional chess. He'd make moves that didn't have an immediate calculatable payoff, but that slowly improved his position, building this kind of strategic pressure that the machine's evaluation function just couldn't really appreciate. And that led to step 3, exploitation. His whole strategy came to a head in the 6th and final game of the match. He didn't checkmate the machine in some blaze of glory. No, he did something far more intellectually satisfying. He slowly, patiently suffocated it. He created a position where Deep Blue's pieces were just tied in knots, with no mobility and no good moves left. For all its power to calculate millions of positions per second, it was totally useless because there were no good calculations to be made. It was paralyzed. The IBM team was forced to resign. Kasparov had won 4-2. He had adapted, he'd overcome, and he'd held the line for humanity, at least for now.
And that brings us to the rematch. New York City, May 1997. If the first match was a scientific curiosity that kind of blew up into a media sensation, well, the second match was a global blockbuster from the word go. But something had changed. That friendly, almost collegiate atmosphere of scientific exploration from '96, it was gone. It had been replaced by something colder, something harder, and a lot more adversarial. IBM's stock price had soared after that first match, so this was no longer about advancing science, this was about shareholder value. It was a corporate grudge match. And this rematch would become one of the most controversial and psychologically draining events in the history of competition, a turning point that still haunts the world of chess and Garry Kasparov himself.
The shift in tone was immediate and obvious. IBM's project manager, a guy named C.J. Tan, he stated it bluntly. The experiment is over. The implication was crystal clear. The friendly collaboration part was done. This was war. And this new hostility showed up in a really critical way. See, in the world of professional chess, it's standard etiquette, it's a fundamental part of preparing for a match, for opponents to share their recent game histories. You study your opponent's latest games to understand their opening choices, their style, their new ideas. Kasparov's team made this standard request for Deep Blue's training games from the past year. IBM flatly refused. They claimed that since the games weren't official, they had no obligation to share them. And just like that, Deep Blue, which had been upgraded and was now nicknamed Deeper Blue, it became a complete black box. Kasparov was going in to face a totally unknown opponent. He had no idea how it had been improved or what new strategies it might have. This wasn't just being secretive, it was a deliberate violation of the spirit of the game, and it created a massive psychological disadvantage for the human champion before a single piece had even been moved.
The entire saga, the whole controversy, the psychological collapse, it all comes down to a single moment in the second game of the rematch. Kasparov is in a difficult position, but it's one he feels is probably defensible. And then, on its 37th move, Deep Blue plays a move that sends this jolt through Kasparov, and pretty much everyone watching. It was a move that was completely out of character for a machine. It wasn't a tactical shot, it didn't win any material. It was a quiet, subtle, prophylactic move, one designed purely to prevent Kasparov's potential long-term plans. It was strategic, it was patient, it was human-like. It showed a kind of deep positional understanding that brute force calculators just weren't supposed to have. And this one move planted a seed of poison in Kasparov's mind. What was he playing against? Was this some incredible new emergent machine intelligence? Was it just a random, inexplicable software bug? Or, and this was the darkest possibility of all, had a human grandmaster secretly working for IBM stepped in and fed the machine the perfect, soul-crushing move? The hand of God, as Kasparov would later call it. He was no longer just playing a machine, he was playing against a mystery. Psychologically just shattered by that unexplainable move and the machine's powerful play that followed, Kasparov resigned the game a few moves later, totally convinced he was in a hopelessly lost position. The next day, the true horror of the situation was revealed. His team, analyzing the game overnight, discovered that he had missed a perpetual check, a sequence of moves that would have forced a draw. Now, for you or me, that might not sound like a big deal, but for a player of Kasparov's caliber, seeing a simple perpetual check is as automatic as breathing. It's pattern recognition at its most basic level. The fact that he missed it showed just how completely the machine had gotten inside his head. He had become so intimidated, so convinced of its godlike perfection after that strange 37th move, that he completely stopped trusting his own judgment. He gave the machine the benefit of the doubt, just assuming it must be winning. And that's what he means when he says he lost the game twice. First, there was the pain of the official loss. And then, there was the infinitely greater, more humiliating pain of realizing you defeated yourself. His belief in his own mind, it was broken. So here we see the two conflicting stories that created this storm of controversy that honestly lasts to this day. Let's look at Kasparov's side for a minute. He's in the fight of his life against an opponent whose inner workings are a total secret. That opponent makes this inexplicably brilliant human-like move, his completely reasonable request to see the computer's log files just to understand how it made that decision is flatly denied. From his perspective, being suspicious isn't paranoia, it's the only logical conclusion. He feels like he's being cheated. Now let's look at IBM's side. Their official explanation for the weird move was that it was a bug. They claimed Deep Blue had a known flaw where if it couldn't decide between several good options, its failsafe was to default to a random choice from a list of pre-vetted, acceptable moves. They absolutely denied any human intervention and refused to release the full logs during the match, saying they had to protect their proprietary technology. So what you have are two totally irreconcilable stories. Was it sublime emergent intelligence, a simple software glitch, or a secret human hand in the background? Because IBM chose secrecy over transparency, we will never know for sure. And it was this crippling ambiguity, this not knowing, that became the ultimate weapon. The machine didn't just have to beat Kasparov over the board, it had to break his mind with uncertainty. And it worked.
The rest of the match was just a grim story of a champion's psychological breakdown. After a few tense draws, it all came down to the sixth and final game. Kasparov needed a win to tie the match. What followed was a complete catastrophe. A mentally exhausted, paranoid, and just demoralized Kasparov sat down at the board. And in the opening moves of the game, he fell for a well-known trap in an opening called the Caro-Kann defense. It was a rookie mistake, the kind of basic tactical oversight that a player of his level simply does not make. It was the chess equivalent of a professional quarterback forgetting the snap count in the Super Bowl. He wasn't playing the position on the board anymore. He was playing against his own doubts, against the rumors, against the ghost in the machine that IBM had created. He blundered, and just 19 moves into the game, it was over. A stunningly quick and brutal end. Deep Blue had won the rematch, 3.5 to 2.5. The machine had finally, definitively, defeated the champion.
For a lot of people, this would be the end of the story. A tragic, dramatic end, right? The great human champion, humbled and broken by a machine. A symbol of human intellect, seemingly put out. It would have been so easy for Kasparov to become a bitter critic of technology, a Luddite warning everyone about the dangers of AI. But Kasparov's genius, it turns out, isn't limited to the chessboard. In what might be his most brilliant move of all, he did the exact opposite. He stared directly into the abyss of what had defeated him. He analyzed it, he understood it, and he decided to make it his partner. From the ashes of his most public and painful defeat, he forged this revolutionary new idea. Not human versus machine, but human plus machine. It was a pivot that completely reframed him, not as a loser in a battle, but as a visionary for the future.
This is his new concept, which he called advanced chess, or sometimes freestyle chess. He realized that the 1997 match had been asking the totally wrong question. The question shouldn't be human or machine. It should be, what can a human and a machine accomplish together? The idea is both incredibly simple and really profound. A human player and a computer program work together as a single team. This centaur, as it's sometimes called, gets the best of both worlds. The human provides the things machines lack: long-term strategy, intuition, purpose, creativity, and a deep understanding of the game's hidden psychological side. The machine, in turn, provides what we humans lack: flawless tactical calculation, an immense memory of theory, and perfect, blunder-free execution. The human becomes the strategist and the visionary. The machine becomes the ultimate tactical weapon, perfectly carrying out the strategic plan. It's a partnership that's designed to elevate the game to a level of quality that neither a human nor a machine could ever achieve on its own.
So, to test this new idea, Kasparov started hosting these online freestyle chess tournaments. He invited the whole world to participate. And as these tournaments got going, something completely unexpected, something truly baffling started to happen. You would expect the winners to be the top grandmasters, right? The Kasparovs and Kramniks of the world, armed with the most powerful supercomputers money could buy. But they weren't winning. The results were being dominated by these unknown names, by amateur players with what seemed to be just average computers. It was a total mystery that led Kasparov to this powerful new insight, an observation so important that it's been nicknamed Kasparov's Law, and it has implications that stretch far, far beyond the 64 squares of a chessboard.
This formula right here is the punchline to the entire story. The winners of a major freestyle tournament turned out to be a pair of amateur players from the United States, and they were using several standard chess programs on their laptops. How could they possibly beat a grandmaster who was paired with a state-of-the-art supercomputer? Well, the answer was their process. Let's break this down. The grandmaster, the strong human, often had an inferior process. They tended to use the machine like a simple calculator, just passively asking it, what's the best move? They just deferred to its judgment. The amateurs, the weak humans, had a better process. They were masters of collaboration. They knew how to manage multiple computer analyses at once, how to ask the right strategic questions, how to probe the engines for ideas, and, this is crucial, when to trust their own human intuition over a machine's recommendation. They weren't just players, they were like conductors of a computational orchestra. And this led to Kasparov's grand conclusion. Our future value doesn't lie in being better calculators than our machines. That is a battle we will always, always lose. Our value lies in being better leaders, better managers, and better collaborators with our machines. The uniquely human contribution is the process itself.
This incredible insight that process trumps power is what elevates Kasparov's story from just a fascinating piece of chess history into a really vital lesson for every single one of us. Because the same forces of automation and collaboration that transformed the world of chess are now reshaping our entire global economy. The questions he was forced to deal with, about being replaced, about adapting, about finding new value, they're no longer just for grandmasters. They are for all of us. So what can his journey teach us about our jobs, our fears, and our collective future in an age of ever smarter machines?
The fear of being replaced by a machine is anything but new. Kasparov loves to point to the story of the elevator operator. The technology for automatic push-button elevators actually existed as early as the year 1900, but for decades it just didn't catch on. Why? Because people were afraid. They felt psychologically unsafe stepping into a metal box dangling in a shaft without a human being in charge. It felt unnatural, just like a lot of people today feel uneasy about the idea of a self-driving car. So what changed? A crisis. In 1945, a massive elevator operator strike paralyzed New York City, and all of a sudden, the inconvenience and the economic cost of not having automation became greater than the fear of the technology itself. This crisis, combined with a huge PR campaign, finally shifted public opinion. The story shows this powerful and recurring cycle. A new technology comes along, it's met with social fear and resistance, and then, often driven by a crisis or a clear need, it's finally accepted and eventually becomes so normal we can't even imagine life without it.
And while automation undeniably gets rid of certain types of jobs, the historical record is pretty clear. It always creates new ones. Just look at this list. A generation ago, none of these professions really existed in any meaningful way. Mobile app designers exist because the invention of the smartphone created an entirely new software ecosystem. Drone pilots exist because of advances in robotics, batteries, and GPS. Social media managers exist because of the rise of global communication platforms. Kasparov's argument is that technology's role is to push us up the value chain. It automates the routine, the repetitive, and the dangerous parts of work, which forces us, and frees us, to focus on the things that require creativity, critical thinking, strategic planning, and human interaction. A farmer today doesn't need to sow seeds by hand. She can manage a whole fleet of GPS-guided tractors and analyze crop data. The job hasn't disappeared. It's been transformed into something more complex, more cognitive, and ultimately more productive.
This brings us to the final, and I think the most profound, turn in Kasparov's incredible journey. It's a journey that took him from being the world's best at a very specific, very niche mental task, to being defeated by a machine designed for that exact task, to ultimately realizing that the purpose of these machines isn't to make us obsolete. It is to challenge us, to push us, to force us to redefine what it even means to be human in the first place. It's an optimistic vision for sure, but it is also a demanding one.
And right here we find the core of Kasparov's modern philosophy. Read those words carefully: creativity, curiosity, beauty, and joy. He argues that for centuries, technology has been freeing us from physical drudgery.
Very few of us today spend our lives lifting heavy stones or tilling fields by hand, and that physical freedom allowed for an explosion in art, science, and culture. He believes intelligent machines are simply the next step in this grand historical process. They are tools for automating the heavy lifting of the mind, the brute force calculation, the data analysis, the rote memorization. And what does that leave for us? The good stuff, the things that give our lives meaning. Our humanity, he argues, was never tied to one specific skill. We thought it was our physical strength until engines became stronger. We thought it was our ability to calculate until computers became faster. We thought it was our strategic genius until Deep Blue won. Each time a machine matches us at a task, we are not diminished, we are liberated, and we are challenged to find a deeper, more essential definition of ourselves. This isn't a threat, it's a gift.
In the end, Kasparov's story leaves us with a challenge that is no longer his alone. It is ours. We are all players in this game now, whether we like it or not. The technology is not going to wait for us to be ready. The game is underway. As he says, the only way to win, to really thrive in this new world, is to think bigger, to be more ambitious in our goals, more creative in our solutions, more curious about the world around us, to embrace the tools that challenge us and use them to augment our own unique human purpose. Our machines will undoubtedly continue to get smarter, faster, and more capable. The profound and urgent question he leaves for all of us is, will we